Okay, so I'm gonna get started. My title does not quite match what was on the schedule, because I reworked some things. This is largely about community involvement with raptors and other predators and rodenticide, since we as rehabbers are often the first line of educators with these topics. A little bit about me. I graduated from Edgar College in 2021 with an environmental biology degree. I'm still a rescuer and board secretary for Birds and Helping Hands. I also work with multiple other rescues, rehabs in the area from Pinellas County all the way up to Citrus County. I'm currently a wildlife care staff and the permitted rehabber at Homosassa Springs Wildlife State Park. I have to disclose, I am not presenting on behalf of the state park. This is only me as an individual. So a little bit about the problem. I think a lot of us as rehabbers know about anticoagulant rodenticides and what they do to the food chain. How my initiative began, I've been working on this for about 5 years, and how to gather community involvement in your areas. So for those of us who are not familiar with it, this is a little demonstration from Raptors as a Solution, which is based out of California. They are a huge advocate against the use of rodenticide, particularly anticoagulants. But basically how it starts, for those that aren't familiar, these little poison boxes will be put out in front of businesses, people's homes, typically containing anticoagulant rodenticides, which are going to be blood thinners. The rodents go inside, they eat the poison that's inside of the box, and then as they leave the box, it spreads amongst the food chain. This can be up the food chain to raptors and birds of prey, or animals like foxes, bobcats, even domestic pets. As we know, we don't want cats outdoors, but sometimes they get poisoned. I've even known people's dogs to be poisoned by ingesting rodents that have been poisoned already. It can even seep into the ground and poison insects, worms, other invertebrates, and work its way up the food chain that way. One ingestion of poison doesn't necessarily kill the rodent, and it doesn't necessarily kill the predator either, but as it bioaccumulates in the animal's liver, as they eat more and more poisoned animals, it will bioaccumulate and eventually kill them. And it also, I love this particular chart because it demonstrates that it can also enter the waterways. I've pulled crabs out of rat boxes that I found in the bay before. There wasn't active poison in there, but the crab was dead, and probably for a reason. So if you've never seen the inside of one of the bait boxes, this is what they look like. When I first got into this, I was under the assumption that the rodents go into the box and are trapped inside of the box, and that's how they work. That's not how they work. The rodents will go inside of the hole. Often there's 2 holes, and they enter in, ingest some of the poison that's located in the center of the box, and then they exit having ingested the poison. The boxes are designed so that children and pets cannot reach their hands inside, but it does not trap the animal. And you do need a special key to open these. Typically it's going to be pest control specialists that have these keys. The only other way to get into it is with brute strength or a hammer, not speaking from experience or anything. So the beginning for me, in 2019, I experienced my first severe rodenticide case. I got a juvenile red-tailed hawk, adult red-tailed hawk. She was a big, beautiful female. She came in, and just as we were starting to triage her, she vomited more blood than I had ever seen come out of an animal, all over me, the floor. And it was pretty traumatic for me as a new rehabber just getting into birds of prey. And it started posing the question for me, why is this preventable death happening? Why aren't more people talking about this? And I figured there's a massive gap in the education on this topic. As I started asking people about it, a lot of people actually asked me, well, how are the birds eating the poison if it's inside of the rat boxes? That's not what's happening. And that was where I first noticed that people really don't know a whole lot about this topic. So I started working on some education. And of course, I started by doing non-toxic education. I wanted everybody to go completely non-toxic, and ultimately, you'll see, I found that wasn't going to be my success point. But there's lots of ways that you can manage rodents just non-toxically. The first steps are going to be sanitation and exclusion. So that means keeping your property clean, people with fruit trees, picking up your fruit when it falls on the ground, removing it from the trees. Some people bring in bird feeders at night because that's going to attract rodents to your home. Exclusion is going to be sealing any entry points in your home or business or whatever you're trying to protect from rodents. Because, as much as we're all rehabbers, we get it, rats can be problems. They get inside of your vehicles, they chew up cords, they'll chew up holes in your attic. We don't want them there, but there's ways to keep them out. If you do end up with a rodent problem, there are ways of deterring them. Some people use scents such as coyote urine. I've heard a lot of success from these little devices. They're about $40 on Amazon. It's an ultrasonic speaker and it has flashing lights. It does not bother humans, pets, and it makes a relatively silent sound. You leave it on in your attic and the flashing lights and the sound of it deters the rodents, and then you can plug up any holes that they were coming into. If that doesn't work, of course, there's plenty of non-lethal ways of trapping them to remove them from your home or property. And then there's plenty of lethal methods. I don't like using lethal methods, but if you're going to do so, what I found is the most humane is the zap traps, the electric traps that use electricity to actually euthanize the animals. I have personally used these at our state park. We got rid of poisons and switched to these, and we had great success in the areas that we were having rodents infiltrate because of leftover food from our resident animals. So these are great, and there's actually some industrial versions of these now that some of the pest control companies are creating and putting out, where they'll kill because this is a single kill, they'll kill up to 10 rodents in an evening, and it'll notify you every time you get a kill, so then you can dispose of the rodents the next day. I also want to caution, usually people will see these black boxes, you see them outside of buildings, outside of businesses, and you automatically assume that there's going to be rodenticides in them. That is not always the case. This is about learning from others' experiences and failures and not making the same mistakes. I accused the city of Dunedin of using anticoagulant rodenticides, and I was very embarrassed when they posted a video of opening up their empty rodent boxes. They had snap traps inside of them. They put the snap traps inside of the black boxes to keep children, pets, and other animals from getting snapped. So you do want to know, and sometimes people put glue traps in them. As much as we all hate glue traps, it's still a non-toxic item that can be put in these black boxes. So don't always assume. Check and verify before you start making accusations. So where the change began for me, so I always said I was kind of screaming into the void about this subject. I was trying to get everybody to go non-toxic. Nobody cared because rats are a bigger problem than toxins in the environment. The change began when we had a locally famous pair of great horned owls start to lose their chicks as a result of anticoagulant rodenticide poisoning. This is Oliver. He was named by the local community. This is a male that had been nesting in a county park, Philippi Park, for about 10 years in total. They were in a nest area that's very easily photographed by the public, and they would have crowds of people come every year. People would fly in from California and New York because this was the best photography option that they had for these owls. They could watch the chicks be raised every year. They named the chicks every year. The community really got invested in these. So then when the chicks started to slowly die, they started turning to the community and saying, what's happening? So Emily was the name of his mate, and these are some of the pictures of the chicks. In 2021 was the first year that we lost all 3 chicks. They were just fledgling age, and they dropped one by one to the ground with signs of rodenticide poisoning. Actually, Nancy in Raptors Center was involved with that. I was out in college, and I kept hearing about it. One chick died, the next chick died, eventually all 3 died, and they did not have another clutch that season. But we didn't really know what the cause was. We all suspected it. We hadn't confirmed that it was rodenticide poisoning. So we didn't do a whole lot of work with it that year, and we just hoped for the best the following year. And then come the following year, the first chick died, and I got the phone call, and that was when I decided I'm gonna be that crazy lady, and I'm gonna go out there and pick up this chick and find a way to get it necropsied to prove to everybody in the community that this is rodenticide, because they weren't going on just, we're rehabbers. They said, how can we prove it? So we did, we proved it. We picked up the first chick, we sent it to Bronson, we got it necropsied, and it tested positive for not 1, but 2 different anticoagulants. And then, of course, the second chick died, and one by one, we lost the entire family including both the parents that year. There was one chick that remained that she did not get poisoned, but she ultimately perished by becoming orphaned and losing both of her parents to anticoagulant rodenticide. So all of the remains were necropsied, confirmed. They had first and second generation anticoagulants in their livers when we tested them. And this was the photo. I kind of felt, honestly, like I was exploiting this bird, but this photo made it on the cover of Tampa Bay Times, and this was Oliver. I picked him up after he died to do the necropsy testing, and this is where the community really got involved. When they saw this photo of this bird that they had been watching for the last 10 years, dead in my arms, they wanted to do something, and it sparked a fire in everybody. And that was what we needed. We needed to lose an ambassador that everybody cared about in order to get people to start making change. So that was when the team and the research began. As the community members started coming up to me saying, what can we do? We knew it was anticoagulant rodenticide, but how do we stop this? How do we prevent it from happening again? How do we protect the birds that were still living at that time? So we actually crowdfunded for a total of 10 necropsies in about 6 months' time, because it actually reached a point where people were coming up to me with dead birds that they had found in their yard saying, do you think this died of rodenticide poisoning? Here you go. So at about $250 a bird, we sent them to Bronson, had them all tested. Every single one of those birds that we tested, it did end up having anticoagulants in them. So we were armed with data and proof for the community, and we started to begin to see change. That was when a group that was coined the name the Owl Team was formed. This is some of our volunteers here. One of the volunteers is an avid photographer that had been watching these birds for the total of 10 years. Just so happened to be a PhD biochemist who had worked in the pest control industry for 35 years. So he was an awesome member to add to our team, and we started doing some research together because we found that as much as we pushed for the non-toxic efforts, people kept saying, but what am I supposed to do about the rodents in my home? They weren't satisfied with the exclusion, sanitation, the lethal traps, or the non-lethal traps. It just wasn't good enough, especially for businesses like restaurants that have to meet certain sanitation standards. So after much research with Dr. Shotgun, the biochemist, we came to the determination that there are some options out there that don't bioaccumulate in secondary consumers. And this is not to push these products on anybody. It is up to you when you educate what you choose to recommend. We recommend these as safer alternatives. They are not safe. They are still poisons. If something ingests these directly, they are still poisons. However, bromethylene and cholecalciferol is a neurotoxin and vitamin D toxin that do not bioaccumulate in secondary consumers based on multiple peer-reviewed studies. And then there's also Radex is one of the big ones that I tried to push, and I was told that it was not very effective. It's a sodium and gluten-based product that causes dehydration death in the rodents. So bromethylene is a single feeding, as well as the cholecalciferol, and I've actually been told by some of the consumers and the people that have switched to these that they are less expensive because when they have their pest control companies come out, they do not have to be serviced as often. So they actually end up saving people money. So this is some of the information cited. With Dr. Chalkin and I, we did a ton of research on both of these products before we decided to recommend them as safer alternatives. Personally, I hate the whole lab rat idea and the fact that they actually tested these on barn owls, but they did multiple studies and fed poisoned rodents to barn owls and found that there was no effects on the owls as they fed them these rodents. There was one small case of very minor reversible effects. So education is key with the subject. We found that most people had no idea that their black boxes that they had on their property was harming the birds. And when we told them, I actually had some people come to me in tears saying, I had no idea, I feel like I contributed to the death of these owls. What can I do to do better? So we started going around. We actually made these little pamphlets, and we went door to door with volunteers in the neighborhoods that were closest to the park, because our first goal was to protect the animals in that area. We went door to door, knocked on doors, left flyers, talked to people, and we started getting some momentum, but it wasn't quite enough at that point. We wanted to get the big businesses and the places that were going to be using the most of the poison, not just the homeowners, to join our side. And with some positive reinforcement, we were able to do that. So what we decided to do was partner with businesses and municipalities and use positive reinforcement by giving them certificates and advertising their businesses when they decided to make the switch to what we call factor-friendly products. So we're kind of going on the honor system. You know, they're telling us and showing us some forms of proof that they have switched to one of the safer alternatives or a non-toxic product. And then we award them with a certificate, take their photo, put them on our website, share them on Facebook, and give them all that positive publicity. The city of Safety Harbor was actually my biggest win because they started out as my biggest enemy. This is in front of one of the city buildings. We have the city seal and a nice big rodent box with anticoagulant rodenticide in it. When I first called them up and asked them what they were using for their rodent control, they told me they didn't know. When I called them again, they didn't want to tell me. When I did a public records request, then they had to tell me. And they were using anticoagulant rodenticide even in their parks. Out at tennis courts, I found rat boxes out in the woods in public parks. Nowhere that we needed to be doing rodent control, they were just everywhere. Part of their problem was they weren't doing enough sanitation and exclusion in the city locations. They weren't emptying trash cans often enough. We shifted that. They started emptying trash cans daily. They automatically reduced their rodent problem. And it, unfortunately with them, did take a little bit of public shaming. When this photo of the city seal and the black box went out and made it on the news, I got a phone call the next day from the city manager saying, what can I do to change? What can I do to be better? So that was where it began with them. And they decided to do right by us and the birds, and they actually became one of our biggest partners. So we issued them a certificate of recognition. All of the city commissioners here got a little certificate that they hung in their office. Most of them were thrilled to be a part of the initiative. And then they actually had one of their media specialists help us with our pamphlet. And they helped us create this pamphlet that we hand out. They put their seal on it, and they sent it out in the water bills to all of the city, all residents that get water bills. And even those that got the paperless water bills, they got a copy emailed to them. And they got contact information, so if they wanted to make the change, they had information on how to do so. The biggest win, though, was they actually passed the first resolution in the state against the use of anticoagulant rodenticide. Because of the state laws in Florida, we cannot pass a law against the use of it, but you can pass a resolution against it, which basically encourages businesses and residences to not use it and to use alternatives. So it was the first of its kind for Florida, and we've actually had some other cities across the state follow suit because of Safety Harbor. So some of the wins that we made just through education, like I said, the city passing the resolution against the sale and use of anticoagulants was huge. And after we did that, we actually got a couple local pest control businesses. We knew a couple owners of pest control businesses, and we say, hey, do you want to partner with us? Do you want to get a certificate that you can put up in your window and advertise to your consumers that you're doing right by the Raptors? So all it took was about 2 pest control companies to partner with us before we actually had pest control companies calling us saying, how can we become partners with you? How can we be a part of this mission? Now we have about 25 pest control companies that have agreed to cease the use of anticoagulant rodenticides. So these are companies that had been previously hired to put out anticoagulants, had been misinforming their consumers and saying that first generation anticoagulants were safer, these won't poison the animals. We not only educated the business owners and their staff, but we educated their consumers, and they have partnered with us. So now we have a list on our website of 20-some different pest control companies that when somebody comes up to us and says, I have rats in my house, I don't want to do it myself, who do you suggest I hire? I can say, here's a link to all the local businesses that do it right. So that was a huge positive reinforcement win. We got spotlighted in a bunch of media. As far as Tampa Bay Times, we were on the cover of the Sunday paper. We also had some issues in actually New York papers, which was really interesting from the residents that had been flying down from New York to visit our owls. They spread the word out there, so we got a lot of national attention. We spoke on a couple media outlets, radios, websites, news channels, and we got the word out there. And as the word spread more and more, we had more and more people reaching out, asking what they could do to be a part of the change. So we have handed out countless certificates of recognition. I actually tried to count and lost track. This is not just to pest control companies, but to businesses in the community, whether it's a restaurant or a gym that decided to stop using anticoagulants on their property and switch to something else. We have now a ton of necropsy data, and we've actually started fundraising for more necropsy data. We've partnered with some of the local Sierra clubs and of Audubon, some of the local chapters. They've started fundraising for necropsy data as well. We have even done necropsies of now mammals, not just birds of prey. So it's still, unfortunately, people call me every time they find a dead animal and they're like, do you think this died of rodenticide? And now I have the ability to say, well, let's find out. And we're able to send it into Bronson and have it tested. The other big win was my college. When I was a freshman, I posed the idea to them, and this was after I had that red tail die on me. I said, let's get rid of the rat boxes. Let's go non-toxic. That's what our college is all about. They didn't want to do it. And I was super bummed. And I kept nagging them every year. And then it wasn't until after I graduated and I was able to provide them with alternative options that they were willing to jump on the idea, and they have switched and are continuing to use the safer alternatives. So there are still rat boxes on premises, but they are no longer having bioaccumulation problems, and the birds of prey that they have nesting there, they have a nest of great horned owls this year, are now safe from bioaccumulation of anticoagulants. So our key strategies, the biggest thing I have to say is educating with kindness and not being accusatory, because most of these people don't know that they're doing something wrong. They're not trying to hurt the birds, and as soon as they find out that they're possibly harming other animals, they want to do something different. I do say into proven otherwise, because I have had some people that just don't care. We have had some people that throw anticoagulant rodenticide out in their yard because they don't like squirrels, they don't like raccoons. That's a totally different issue that we have had to have FWC involved in, and we have had some wins on that. But typically what I have found is if you come at businesses or municipalities with an accusatory attitude, saying, you have these black boxes all over, you must be poisoning them, don't you know? They freeze up and they don't want to work with you. Unfortunately, we lost a partnership with a local pest control company recently because the community was so fired up when they posted an advertisement in a local community group saying, here's, our business. They were looking for new customers, and a bunch of people asked, well, what chemical are you using? And then I got one tag after another saying, what kind of chemical is this? I confirmed it was a second generation anticoagulant. They were misinforming their consumers and saying that it was safe because they were using it in a black box. And then the community attacked them online, and now they're unwilling to work with us. So that was super disappointing. I'm trying to recreate a partnership with them, but they haven't wanted to work with some people with us. So, what was that? Yes, yeah. So educating with kindness is the number one factor that we found success with. And then, of course, appealing to emotion. Using ambassadors, this is one of the ambassadors at Moccasin Lake Raptor Sanctuary who went on the news with me to talk about this. We were on Fox 13. So using your own ambassadors at your facility, or if you don't have your own ambassadors, using ambassadors in the community. There's a great horned owl nest at the college. There's a great horned owl nest at Fort DeSoto, which is another county park that everybody loves to photograph. So if you appeal to the human emotion of, don't you love photographing these owls? Don't you want them to be around for generations to come? You're going to get more buy-in from the community. And that's how we motivated the change. And then offering incentives to become raptor friendly, because people aren't necessarily going to do it just because of the kindness of their heart. A lot of praise and publicity can go a long way. This is actually a local vitamin company that was so excited to be able to go raptor friendly. They didn't know they were doing anything wrong. They got their entire crew together for their photo with their certificate, and they also got owl safe, no poison signs to put all over their business because they were so excited. And they've started talking to other businesses as well, and other people in the community, and since then we've had tons of people reach out wanting to do better. We formed a Facebook group as well to stay up to date, and this is mainly for our local community, but we have people, like I said, all the way in New York and California, that have joined the group and are staying up to date. Mainly in here, it's the community posting about our owls, that have moved back into Philippi Park, but I've had people in Southern Florida and other locations join and post pictures of the birds of prey in their community and say, how can I do better to protect them? So if you want to stay up to date, you can join us on Facebook, or visit our website. It's something Owls Strong. I think it's a weekly website. We have all of our resources on there, printouts, flyers that you can hand out, more information, the sources cited, things like that, anything you want to know, as well as contacts for those of us that are involved in this project. And as of last year, we do have a new pair of owls that have moved into Philippi Park that we're trying to protect. So it was super sad the first year that there was no babies there, and the community kind of came out every week and they were looking for them. Since the new pair have moved in, the community is back and photographing the owls and have a new motivation to continue protecting the community and the other birds of prey in the area. Unfortunately, this year and last year, the new parents have failed to thrive with their chicks, but we're pretty sure it's just because they are young birds and they don't know what they're doing yet. So hopefully next season, we'll have new babies, but it's definitely sparked the momentum again, and people are coming up to me again saying, what can I do? And the education mission has started again. We actually have some volunteers that are going out door to door again, handing out pamphlets, just reminding everybody of this issue. Any questions?
Hey, firstly,
Yeah.
wow, awesome. You're so cool. I was curious about the vitamin D pesticide. So this particular part I'm a novice on, so forgive me if I sound stupid. But recently, this past year, we received an opossum transfer to us, and I'm not an opossum rehabber, but the person who transferred it, had quite a bit of experience, and she said that the opossum had come to her suffering from vitamin D poisoning, and in an opossum, an overdose or a deficiency in vitamin D can cause like neurologic issues and torticollis, neurologic induced torticollis. Is that scary to recommend to people because of the opossums?
Absolutely. So that's why we recommend them as the safer alternative. It still needs to be used in a box that is tamper-proof. The idea is that the animals like opossums cannot reach their hands inside of those boxes. But direct consumption of this is still a poison. And I always tell people that these are for the companies like the restaurants and big businesses like Walmart. We actually got Taco Bell to switch, which I was really shocked by. It's for companies like that that will not go non-toxic. I don't like recommending toxic options, but it was a kind of last resort option. If you're not willing to switch, but we can get you to stop using anticoagulants, this is one of the safer options. I did have some companies switch to the Radex, and they said it wasn't working, and then they switched right back to anticoagulants. So that was when we decided that we have to give them something as an alternative if we want them to stop using anticoagulants. So I was actually discussing this with Dr. Shocking yesterday. We still don't love recommending these. These are very much last resort. But polocoxaferol, though, it does have an antidote if you look into it a little bit more. In the peer-reviewed studies, they mentioned some of the antidotes that are used for direct consumption. Yep.
Did the peer-reviewed studies look at just birds or mammals?
Birds and mammals. So the one study, again, this makes me sad, they used lab beagles and birds. So they actually fed the lab beagles rodents that had been poisoned with both of these products, and found that it did not bioaccumulate in the secondary consumers.
So when you're doing the necropsies, are there any other symptoms of the bioaccumulation, like low body condition, feather condition, like what else other than the toxins being in their system is like affecting them?
So usually you'll get the outward appearance, like us as rehabbers, if we're not doing the toxicology, you can look at the birds and see, I think I actually have a photo. Yeah. So typically you're gonna see bleeding from the rectum, the eyes, the mouth, the nares, that's one of the first signs, low body condition. And the biggest one is dehydration. This is actually Emily, the female that had been there for over 5 years, and this is her in Tampa Bay. This was right before Barb Walker and my parents rescued her. They pulled her out of the bay. She was so desperate for water that she was submerged herself in drinking salt water. So you'll see signs like that, and she was in low body condition, and unfortunately with her, she was alive when we rescued her, but it was too late at that point. And there are technically antidotes for the anticoagulants, but usually once they get to the point where they're like this, there's no time to get them into rehab and give them said antidotes.
The other thing that you see sometimes where you don't see the active bleeding is you go to give them fluids and you pull that needle out and it's bleeding.
Yeah.
And that's unusual, right?
In the renal area.
So that's a clue right there that you may have anticoagulant poison.
Yeah, and a lot of us as rehabbers can look at this and we know, but the issue that I found was I had to prove it to the municipalities and the businesses because they're like, oh, you're just going on assumption, you're just a rehabber, what do you have to say about that? And I've actually gotten to the point where now that I've gathered some more experience in necropsying myself, I'm gonna start trying to save us money by just sending in liver samples myself, because that's what they need for the toxicology. And when they do the gross necropsy and look at all of the organs, there's usually major hemorrhaging inside the body that you can see, but that's not necessarily essential. If you wanna know exactly what toxin is inside of the animal, you're gonna need liver samples and it has to be sent out for toxicology, which actually the state lab usually sends them either to California, I think it's Oregon, so it's extra money when you want to have them do the primary necropsy and then the toxicology as well. Yeah.
So in the community, we experience a lot of frustrations with these small businesses. They're not paying a pest control service. They can't live trap unless it's in a black box.
Yep.
They can't release the rats because we're
Yep.
gonna take a bunch of rats.
Yep.
They turn to these commercial alternatives like the Radex or whatever, and they are throwing it out in the
Yep.
yard.
Yep.
And we kind of don't have anything else to suggest to them because the zap traps are very expensive as well.
Yep.
Kind of what do you do for them?
So the zap traps, I found you can get some of them relatively cheap on Amazon, as well as the deterrents. So the main thing I start with communities like that is the sanitation exclusion. Go to their facility, go to the restaurant, and I can go and say, here's an example right here, you've got a trash can that's overflowing, this is attracting rodents, fix that first. And then here's a hole, this is where they're coming in, plug that with steel wool, fix that. And one thing at a time to eliminate the items that are attracting the rodents to the places, and then switch to the last resorts. And you can purchase some of, I think it's the vitamin D product, you can purchase it over the counter at, like Home Depot and things like that. So they could use something like that if they really wanted to. They won't go non-toxic, they're not having success with the other alternatives, that's an option you can recommend.
It's still a safety issue though,
Yeah.
because they can't buy a black box.
You
That's why
cannot-
I think that,
You can now.
yeah, and Fairl can speak to this because we had an issue with squirrels in the same area. They cannot legally throw poison all over our yard. So if somebody is throwing it out like that, call FWC and have an officer to call.
It's not last resort though, right? I don't wanna say stop doing this or we're calling you guys.
Well, it's not even a matter of threatening, it's a matter of seeing it, it will kill the animals in the area.
They don't.
I know they don't care, but you know what, they might care when FWC shows up at their door.
Yeah,
We
so.
are not law enforcement, and sometimes, you can have like people cutting down a tree company, cutting down a tree with an active nest in it. I immediately will call FWC and they say, you didn't have to call the law. I have no legal authority to tell you to stop throwing poison or to stop cutting a tree. When a law enforcement shows up at your door, and you didn't have to call cops. It's like, well, yeah, I did, because I don't have the authority to make you stop.
Yeah, so one of the things that you could try first before calling the feds, is I've had some experiences with this, with people that just didn't care, they wanted to kill everything. If you can fundraise, and I know a lot of us are scrounging for money and funds, but if you can fundraise and offer them, here's a black box, you can purchase it on Amazon, it might cost us $30, here is something that you can use, try this, and then if you continue having issues with them, call FWC, ask an officer to come out and educate them, and then when the education doesn't work, you can try having them cite them, because we've had to do that before. Yeah.
Just a general comment. Owls are understudy
that is what I have found we do not have, because, and as you know, we have collected animals for necropsy and had them stored in our freezer until we had funding. But often this is happening and we're not knowing about it. They're dying out in the woods and people aren't seeing it. The birds that we tested are just the animals that people saw. They were in residential neighborhoods, they were in county or city parks, and they brought them to us and said, can you test these? Like you said, it is completely understudied, and that was part of our problem. We actually did all of this project in 2021, 2022, when the EPA was up for review of these chemicals, and one of the issues that we had was there wasn't enough data to present to the EPA to combat the big businesses that want to promote the anticoagulant rodenticides. We did have some small wins with the EPA, and we put in a lot of public comment, but they still haven't banned the products like they need to.
And the review process is how long?
Oh my gosh, the review process is they review it every 13 years, and then, but the actual review process of the comments, they are still reviewing the comments that we sent in, a while back.
Is there a group nationally, you know, we that Raptors are the solution in California, and that there's a ton of, I haven't been on your website recently, I don't know if that's today, but there's a ton of information out there on that RATS, Raptors are the solution, RATS.org. But honestly, is this what Fairl's doing? Somehow, we need to mount that on a national level.
Yep.
We should go to the new Secretary of the Interior, who just got elected, you know, who just got put into office, and say, you know what, and I've talked to a couple people and said, we get every rehabber in the country, get somebody to work on a project, and go through the list, like FWC, and go through that, and try to really launch, we need to launch a national effort, because as, it's not only our owls, if you work in, one of our volunteers works at Blue Pearl, she said they see poisoning all the time in dogs and cats, pediatric emergency rooms, 25,000 kids every year are poisoned with rat poison, so this is an effort we all need to get behind.
Yeah, and there's currently not a national project. This is a kind of Pinellas County local thing. We were so fortunate to have a great working group. We had Raptor Center Tampa Bay, Moccasin Lake Raptor Sanctuary, Birds and Helping Hands. We got all of our local rehabbers to join forces on this effort, but this is just one small area, and we've tried to expand it more statewide. We've gotten in contact with Raptors as a solution, but there's not a large communal issue. And like you said, children are being poisoned too, and it's normally in underprivileged communities where they don't have the resources to contain the products properly, they don't have the education, and children are dying of it. So sometimes when the people don't care about the animals, I try presenting the child issue, and it hasn't gotten me too much further either. You had a question that I didn't hear?
This is a little bit off the rodenticide, but, is there anyone working, I would be willing to lead and move me on this, but
Yeah.
glue traps.
I-
Songbirds are the most commonly trapped, but of course squirrels, snakes. We had 2 red-tailed hawks come through this past year, at the end of the year, stuck in glue traps.
Yep.
And we got them all cleaned up and everything, and there wasn't relatively little feather damage, but, I mean, and I saw the blue trap in the black box, but that
Yep.
still could be problematic
Absolutely.
because snakes and squirrels, other animals that aren't being targeted.
Yep.
So is there could we, like, all as rehabbers, like, work on getting together this blue trap, like,
That
it
would
should
be
be
amazing.
banned?
Absolutely, and it's just like the anticoagulants, and because
Yeah.
a lot of times with the glue traps, people think, I'm using a non-toxic product. That's one of the other things that I found we were using at my work and at other state parks that we have now gotten rid of, because of that. So whenever I'm doing this education, I always throw in there, yeah, glue traps are non-toxic, but they hurt animals too. Barb and I had a screech owl that had gotten stuck in sticky tape and had a dislocated wing, and that wasn't even a proper glue trap, but when people see the effects of the glue traps and the things that are similar to it, I think that's when we get the buy-in, and it can go completely hand in hand with this project.
About going national, there's a lot of state legislation out there, some of it sets a good example. And one place you can look at, if you wanna see good state work is done by a rehabber in a place called Hope. So that there are successes
Yeah.
around the country, but it really, that national effort, if you can
And what we need to do is pull together as rehabbers and get that buy-in. You know, so many of us have education animals that we can get people invested in and say, do you wanna protect animals like this guy? And that's how we get the buy-in.
Well, and making sure that our state has the copy of that language.
Is, your pamphlet that you're passing out to everyone available on your website?
Yep, you can print it out.
Are we able to hand that out to
Absolutely.
As facilities, that's where we can start, right?
Yep.
And moving this outside of your county, moving it to everyone's county.
Yep.
And I don't think that Fairl cares at all if you put your center name on the back.
That's what I was gonna say, if you wanna add your logo to it, or you want some of the
Yeah.
information to make your own version, so some people, you know, or some organizations don't like these two products, and they don't wanna mention these, and they wanna stay fully non-toxic, you can still do that and not mention these, so if you want to make your own version, I'm absolutely happy to help people with that.
Raptors is a solution, has a
They have
very
some
similar
others.
one, and they do not advocate for it.
Just to add to the education aspect, we have a Project Wild team on the app of biosolution that
I didn't know that.
they put together.
That's awesome.
That's right, and if you guys don't know about Project Wild, tell them about Project Wild.
Yeah, so it's a national initiative now, it's grown quite a bit in the last few years. And FWC does little, events and meets and stuff, our park service uses it quite a bit. So we'll go out with the park service and talk about things, and they were the ones that told me about the biosolution. So they're taking that, initiative, it's a national now, education effort, and there's all kinds of different topics on there.
And you can look it up on the state website, FWC does run it, and it's Project Wild and Project Aquatic Wild. So there's one separate book, and there's Project Find Wild. So there's a whole book of activities to do on birds, and you go to a class, and they teach you what to do with them, and they give you the books. You might have to download them today, I don't know, but, the books are just thick, all three of them. But they have great activities, and it's a great program.
There's everything from identifying plants to what to do with your newsletter and everything on there.
Other questions? Oh, yep.
So, yeah, is there a proper way to dispose of, a rat or bird, whatever, it doesn't really matter how,
Yep.
I don't know those things, but, my plant is boxes, and I have
Okay.
really boxes, so if I have a rat in my yard, then I suspect my head basically or.
So,
I've buried something before and the foxes
yes.
dug it up.
So that is a huge challenge, and foxes are one of the animals that are affected by this, and they actually display completely different symptoms, depending on the level of exposure they have. Sometimes it'll display in hair loss and symptoms of mange, which is super interesting. I have not dug into that super in depth, but I have talked to other rehabbers who have. The best option is incineration, to get it out of the environment completely. I understand many places don't have the ability to do that. Some vet's office will let you drop off a body to be disposed, most won't. You certainly don't wanna put it in the trash where other animals are going to eat it. When people don't have the ability to incinerate, the best thing that I can recommend is dig like a 3-foot deep hole, as deep as you can dig.
It's over 6 feet, and we're afraid to
Yeah,
not
Reese
that.
says
Yeah.
6 feet.
And see the digging, burrowing
Yeah.
animals, it's, I just looked into this,
And I
it's
can-
over 6 feet.
Most of us don't have the ability to dig 6 feet.
Reese is holding it 6 feet, but realistically, in Florida, if we need 3 feet, we have water, right?
Exactly, yeah, so that's.
But I can tell you from experience, you can, if you have one, if you don't have a relationship with a local vet, it's not all the time you're asking it, but you can call them. They have most vets, if they bring animals in and they're not belonging to somebody, they cremate them.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna ask for free cremation along with that. You say, I have an animal that's been poisoned, is there any chance you can take it and have it cremated for me? If not, call your pet cremation services in the area and explain to them what's happening and say, can you cremate this bird for me?
Yep.
And those are two other sources for incineration without trying to dig a 6-foot deep hole.
Yeah.
Right.
I've done the 6-foot deep hole with a skid steer, but since most of us don't have that, 3 feet is usually my best compromise. But yeah, reaching out to other vet's office or your county officials like ASPCA, things like that.
Animal control.
Yep,
That's what I was gonna say.
Yep.
Veterinarians have to pay to dispose
yep,
of the animals, so get a relationship with your local humane society or animal services, county animal services.
and sometimes pet shops as well. When I was like getting into working, I worked at a pet shop. It was terrible. But we did have a bulk incineration thing where, you know, when the pets that they neglected because pet trade would die, that was a bulk fee. It didn't fill up that often, so if you had a partnership or a relationship with one of the managers, you could say, hey, can you add this to your freezer stockpile? And then they can potentially have it incinerated. That's a less likely partnership, but animal control is definitely going to be a good one. Any other questions? Cool. Well, I just want to finish it off by thanking all of the partners in this, not only FWRA, but Barb, Nancy, Shelley have been a huge part of this project with me, and Nature World has joined my forces, and it's all about spreading it amongst the community. And if anybody has any questions that they want to do their own initiative or they want to learn more about this, shoot me a message, check out our website, check out our Facebook page. I'm always happy to talk about this.